I can't believe it's already season 7, episode 6, probably. Wow, amazing. Well, one of the hardest things about reinventing yourself is realizing just that the version of success you were chasing before may no longer fit who you are becoming. And that can feel very confusing at first, especially when you have spent years building your identity around achievement. Starting over can be something very difficult. Anyway, this time round, something about my career decision felt very different. Hi, my name is Lydia, and I share real stories in the context of transition. Because change is what happens around us every day, every year, constantly. But transition is what happens within us as we navigate those changes. And many of us spend years adjusting externally. We actually do that very, very well without realizing how much we ourselves are evolving internally. So this channel is for people who want to move through life more intentionally. People who want to understand themselves, grow with awareness, and build lives that feel aligned emotionally, professionally, and personally. We are done just existing. We are done being passers-by in our lives. We are done just reacting to circumstances. We are now in control. We are not existing anymore. We are thriving. Well, I do this because I've experienced many transitions, just like many of us, but I've just learned some things differently. Immigration, career reinvention, motherhood, military life, mental health struggles, identity rebuilding, entrepreneurship, and creating meaningful work while still becoming myself. And one thing I've learned is this: transitions change not only our circumstances, they change our priorities. That is why here we name those transitions that quietly shape us. Because as I said before, we are now in charge and we are thriving. Now, early in life, achievement was deeply connected to how I saw myself. Education, professional progress, titles, forward movement. And for many high achieving people, work becomes more than work. It becomes identity. I remember working very, very hard to get into college, working very, very hard to get into law school, working very, very hard through law school and graduating, working very, very hard to do everything else after graduating law school to become, finally a lawyer, pass the bar and raise your hand and take the oath and everything. I worked very, very hard. And that became my whole life. I pride, is there a past tense of pride? Prided? I think it's just pride. I pride myself in, high achieving. I pride myself in being someone that could put my mind to something and actually do it and challenge myself many times. So that became my identity. I built everything around, being someone who can do stuff, right? But after everything I had experienced, I noticed something changing. I was no longer asking what sounds impressive, because impressive became negotiable for me. And the not the experience, but the explanation or the definition of impressive was widened for me. I was asking what actually fits my life right now. I was trying to build a life of purpose. I was trying to build a life that was going to work with my circumstances. And I realized at that point I was in transition yet again. I was going through a change with my career. I had changed it 2 or 3 times before, and yet again this was another one, because I just come from Kenya. I'd gone through some difficult times. I came back, and I got pregnant, and I'm trying to negotiate with myself what would be my next steps. And then I realized, oh my god, I'm a military spouse. Things started to fall into place, and then I realized, oh, my husband is retiring from the military. Like, there was a transition after transition after transition, and now I had to figure out finally after going through all these years of learning transition and putting in place measures and tools and frameworks to be able to navigate well, I was in a place where the next thing for me was not just going to be another job. It had to be in alignment with my life, with my purpose, which I had to figure out, and the kind of vision I had, not just for 1 year, 2 years, but long term. Now, one thing I appreciated about the book Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans is the idea that life is not always meant to follow one perfectly linear plan. I think most of us have this idea, or maybe we are raised like that, or society makes us believe that life is supposed to follow this path. You get from here into here, and then toddler into being a kid, and then you're in kindergarten, and then there's like a straight path. However, experience is that it's not, and I'm so glad to have read that book. I would very highly recommend it. What they talk about, among the many things they talk about, is testing, exploring, adjusting, learning through movement. And I think many people struggle because they believe changing direction means failure. I was one of those. Now I believe often it means growth. I began paying closer attention to what environments felt healthy for me. And healthy became very known. Before, healthy was abstract. I like, what is a healthy bound? What is a healthy? I now figured out, boundaries between me and how I related with friends, my spouse, my kids. Healthy became more defined. I was asking myself what work felt meaningful, not what just paid the bills and what I felt comfortable doing, but how do I feel while I was doing that work? I asked what pace felt sustainable, because at this point I'm about to have the third child. So I'm trying to figure out, what is this going to be? Oh, sorry, I think I already had my third child. So how is that pace going to work with my 3 children and their various needs? And I had to ask also what aligned with the life I actually wanted to build. Remember, I'm not just now asking for money. There's a lot. And after years of survival mode decision making, and I realized most of us are stuck there, survival mode decision making, that awareness changed everything. The awareness of life should have purpose, life should have meaning. I should be in control of what life is. I must decide to align the things that I do. Now, I'll be the first to admit that one thing transition taught me is that success without alignment can still feel empty. Let me give you an example of how I experienced that in my life earlier, but I had no words to say. I was in corporate doing commercial law in Kenya. That was the first job I did. Carrying the files, going into court. The bank wants to attach someone's property. This a loan wasn't paid, or we are negotiating what's supposed to be paid. We are calling auctioneers, going to court to, like, that paid, but internally I felt empty. Externally it felt, successful, like, oh wow, you're a lawyer, wow, you're earning. But inside I was like, this is not what I want to do. I was dragging myself to court. I was dragging myself through life. I realized you can achieve things externally while internally being disconnected from your own life. I felt like I was going through motions, like, okay, wake up, put on your clothes, go. And then one of my friends went into a nonprofit. She was actually someone I worked with directly. And then they had a pro bono program for lawyers to come and support kids who couldn't afford legal, services and all that. Oh my God, when I started doing that work, there was no stopping. I wasn't earning no money from it, but the fulfillment, the sense of Wow, this feels so good. Let me tell you, eventually the disconnect catches up with you, and it caught up with me. I also realized something else. I was no longer trying to rebuild the exact version of myself I had been before. That version of me existed in a different season with different priorities, different responsibilities, different awareness. And accepting that created for me a level of freedom I had never in my life experienced. And courtesy of that, one thing I now believe deeply is that intentional living requires periodic reassessment. Because transitions, changes. And if we never pause to ask, who am I now? In that process of like pivoting into a different career, you gotta ask, who am I now? And how is this thing going to fit in me, with me now? What matters to me now? I remember my priorities were different. What mattered to me is that I had enough time to spend with my kids. It mattered to me that I had work life, but no. I was about to say balance, but I realized as we talked quite a lot, and I read, I think, 2 books, and also with my therapist, balance, you can never strike a balance. Let's get the fantasy out of here. What mattered to me was work-life harmony. How was I going to harmonize my responsibilities, my priorities, and where I wanted to go with a job? This was supposed to be a component of my life. It wasn't supposed to be my whole life as work was before. I was asking, what kind of life actually supports me now? I wanted flexibility. I wanted purpose. I wanted meaning. I wanted growth, sustainable growth. So I will reiterate that we can spend years chasing identities that no longer fit. And when consciousness and awareness and being intentional, that intentionality will make you realize when there's something that is no longer a fit. But sometimes you can actually realize it by just how you feel. You might not have the words, but you definitely hear it. Now, I think many women especially experience this quietly. Excuse me. We evolve internally, but continue forcing ourselves into old definitions of success because those definitions once worked. But transition often requires recalibration. I think it's also because women, there's like expectations of how you should be, expectations of the life you should lead, expectations of how you should behave. Like there's a lot of societal and not written down, but just the way people behave around you, just the way they respond to you, it's all unwritten, but it's very, very obvious. So we find ourselves continuing to force old definitions of success because we think, oh, a good mother or a good wife or a good friend or a good woman, there's all these things that weigh you down and unconsciously, but they really define how you move with life. I want to offer something to you today. You're allowed to build a different life once you become a different person. I've noticed a lot of movement towards this path, particularly for women, and I really, really like it. If something is not working and you realize it's not working, please abandon it. I'm not saying like wake up and say I'm not going to work today, or of course building a plan and things like that. But please acknowledge who you are in the moment and live a life that aligns with who you are. Or if you still don't know who you are, because I know plenty people go through life without not understanding themselves. That's part of what we are doing here. Please try to find out who you are, what your purpose is, and what makes you happy, and what kind of legacy you want to leave. Living an intentional life, trust me, I could not recommend it more. Now, this career pivot felt different because I was no longer moving from panic. I was moving from awareness, and awareness changes the quality of our decisions. I remember there were some jobs that, yes, I did apply and they did respond, And I went to the first interview, second, and by the time I was supposed to go to the third one, I realized, oh my God, no, there's something here that's just not going to work for me. And suddenly I was just like, thank you for the consideration, but I'm no longer interested in pursuing this. You know, my decisions became like things I thought of as reflections of who I was and who I wanted to become. So they were not just, oh, I'm desperate because I need a job. I'm like, no. And as I became more grounded personally, I started noticing something else. I could not stop thinking about people who were struggling through transitions the same way I had, especially immigrants and military spouses navigating invisible identity shifts without support. And that realization became the beginning of something much, much bigger. I'm going to talk about it next. But for today, I just want to say, sometimes reinvention is not about becoming someone else. Sometimes it's about becoming more honest about who you are now. If you've read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or Think Big and Be Successful, I don't think that's the title, but Think Big. There's something about Think Big there. It's a blue book, I remember reading it. There's something about the first thing you must do with yourself is be honest with ourselves. As humans, I know we like to bury our heads in the sand, or we don't like to sit with ourselves and be uncomfortable with the things that truly bother us. If you don't take anything from me today, I would urge you to please be honest with yourself. Look at yourself. Ask yourself a few questions. Realize who you are, because it's from there that a lot of things will start to make sense and your life might begin to look differently. Well, to close off, if you have ever reached a point where your old definition of success no longer fits your life, I would love to hear what changed for you. Please tell me that in the comments. And if you're navigating a transition right now, a change, a time of uncertainty, a time that you're asking yourself many questions, please use the free grounded transition checklist that's linked below. It's designed to help you identify what may be shifting internally so you can move through change with more awareness and intention. And as I said before, let's expand our definition of change. Change is a lot of things. You might have done the same things, you might live the same place, you might have worked the same place, but life itself is full of changes and it really shifts us internally. We just never take the time to pay attention. Now here, we pay attention. We have decided that we are no longer going to be passers-by in our lives. We are going to take charge, and we are not going to just simply exist or breathe. We are going to thrive. If you like this, if this resonated, please subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone else. See you tomorrow.